Stop. I'm going to put two pictures of spiders on the screen and I want you to pause the video and guess which one is venomous. This should be extremely easy, especially if you live in the United States. So here on the left, a black widow spider, and on the right, a bold jumping spider. Do you have your answer? If you said that the black widow is venomous, then congratulations, you're correct. And if you thought that I was trying to trick you and you went with the jumping spider, then you're correct as well, because almost all spiders possess venom. What matters most of the time isn't if a spider is venomous, but rather how venomous that spider is. So, with that out of the way, today I'm talking about two of my favorite things in the entire world, spiders and history, with a sprinkling of psychology and ecology mixed in for fun. Before we do though, I want to ask you two more questions. First, I'm going to bring up 5 spiders and I want you to try to guess which one is a brown recluse. Okay, go. That was not easy, was it? If you're curious, the brown recluse was spider number 2. It has a violin marking on its head, smooth legs, and a uniformly colored abdomen. But it's almost impossible to notice these things without the aid of a microscope or an up-close photograph, because brown recluses are typically smaller than a penny. Black widows, on the other hand, are easy to identify. You probably knew exactly what you were looking at before I even said what it was in that opening segment with the jumping spider. And it's probably a good thing that it's so easy for us to recognize black widows, because their neurotoxic venom causes extremely painful cramping and kills multiple people every year. But here, even after a considerable amount of time, you likely weren't able to figure out which spider was a brown recluse, which might feel a little scary because brown recluse bites can cause unsightly, painful, and possibly life-threatening skin necrosis, which of course leads us to our next question. Between the bites of black widows and brown recluses, which are the only two spiders in the US that the CDC classifies as medically significant, how many people die every year? The answer is 6 people. It's difficult for us to grasp how astronomically small that number actually is in comparison with the population of the United States. In the US, you are 7 times more likely to be killed by lightning than by a spider of any kind. And you're 10 times more likely to be killed by a bee or a wasp. You have a 1 in 50 million chance of being seriously injured by a spider bite, and your chances of dying even after you are bitten are under 1%. We don't really have deadly spiders in the United States. We have spiders that in rare circumstances kill very elderly or very young individuals that fail to seek medical attention. So why are some US spiders so feared when in actuality there's no real reason for them to be? Well, the answer, as with many things, is poor advertising and bad press. The year is 1935. Adolf Hitler is Chancellor of Germany and working to revoke the citizenship of German Jews, and Babe Ruth is playing his final game of Major League Baseball. During this time, no one in the United States considers native spider species dangerous. Encounters with black widows in outdoor toilets are common enough to warrant noting, but they rarely result in death, so people simply ignore them. Brown recluses have not been identified. The scientific community does not know that they exist. Europeans have lived in North America for roughly 300 years now, with the philosophy of simply ignoring these spiders and letting them be, and the death rates were not significantly larger than they are now. This philosophy would be rocked to its very core in June of that same year when Stephen Liarski committed suicide through the aid of a black widow spider. Liarski's death rocked the entire nation because no one believed that these spiders, which they had lived alongside for years, were capable of causing death as efficiently and reliably as they seemed to in the body of Mr. Liarski. Newspapers ran headlines that demonized the widow as a danger to the nation's children, and massive groups were organized to attempt the eradication of the spiders on the statewide scale. London Zoo even euthanized all of its widows in an attempt to prevent Germans from using them as a bioweapon were they to invade Britain. It turned out, of course, that the swift, unstoppable death of Mr. Liarski was not caused by a spider at all, but by a jar of stolen sleeping pills found under his bed by police. But the damage was already done. Black widows had become synonymous with death, and their threat to the American people, although in actuality quite small, was artificially inflated beyond recognition. Once the brown recluse was identified in the second half of the 20th century, history seemed to repeat itself. Newspapers and other media hyped up the danger of the spider, causing widespread paranoia and fear among the American people. That brings us back to today. The ramifications of mass normalized arachnophobia are extremely consequential. There have been multiple cases where skin cancer has been misdiagnosed as a bite from a brown recluse for no reason other than it being a believable answer to the concerns of a patient. The mass killing of black widows causes an increase in the prevalence of crop-eating pests that some scientists believe could result in massive famines if not regulated soon. And still, these spiders remain effectively docile and generally harmless to humans. One Arkansas family collected over 2,000 brown recluses for aid in scientific research and weren't bitten a single time. And in the aftermath of the black widow suicide, a Texan professor demonstrated that despite actively pressing a black widow against his skin, he was unable to provoke a bite. And while black widows do cause a small number of deaths every year, brown recluses have never caused a single fatality. So let me ask you one final question. I'm going to put 2 spiders on the screen that aid agricultural production, slow the spread of insect-borne illnesses, are extremely hesitant to bite humans, and are only considered deadly because of a misdiagnosed suicide in the 1930s. And I want you to tell me if we should be killing either of those spiders in record numbers out of fear. Okay, go.